My name is Roslyn. I'm a sophomore at St. John's College, and I run the baking club. So today I thought I'd share a baking demonstration. But something I noticed when I went to the grocery store was there's like no yeast on the shelves. So I thought I'd share this recipe. It's for Irish soda bread, which is a quick bread, so it doesn't require yeast. It requires baking soda, which is something I think most people have on their shelves. So yeah, you're gonna need buttermilk. You can either buy buttermilk or you can do what I do, because I don't believe in buying buttermilk. You just use milk and lemons or white vinegar to curdle it. You're gonna need an egg, some flour, sugar, baking soda, salt, butter, and optionally, you could use raisins or craisins. I'm not a huge fan of raisins, but that's what I'm going to use today. So the first thing you want to do is set your oven to 400 degrees. So while that's preheating, we're going to go ahead and make the buttermilk. So 1 3/4 cups milk. And the cool thing about this is the buttermilk is what makes the bread work. It reacts, I think it's something about the acid in it that reacts with the baking soda. And it makes the bread rise like yeast normally does. Let's say like a little bit less than a tablespoon of vinegar, or a full tablespoon. That's what I'm going with. Yeah, give a little bit more. Not really a measurer. Okay, so there we go. We're gonna set this to the side, and I don't know if this actually does anything, but I always cover my buttermilk. We'll just set that to the side. And now if you're reading this recipe, you'll see that it recommends that you do, like, you mix your wet ingredients and you mix your dry ingredients and you mix them together. I don't really do that. I do the one bowl method. So you put all of your dry ingredients into a bowl, and then you put all your wet ingredients into that same bowl, and then you mix them together. And it's just less dishes. Oh, the first thing you want to do actually is find your baking pan or vessel. The options are just like a baking sheet with parchment paper, or you could use like a cake pan. I am actually going to use a skillet. I'm really excited about that. But if you are using a different vessel, I would recommend either putting parchment paper on it or greasing it. Yeah, and then you just set that aside. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna mix the flour, the sugar, the baking soda, and the salt together. So we're gonna need 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I think I might have said 4.5 cups at the beginning, I don't remember, but it's 4 1/4 cups. So 4 1/4. Then we need 3 tablespoons of sugar. 1, 2, 3. 1 teaspoon of baking soda. I actually didn't have any baking soda at home, so I got like one of the last, it's a fancy bag, but it's one of the last baking sodas on the shelf. And then 1 teaspoon of salt. Then what you want to do is you're going to cut in the butter. You need, I think it was 5 tablespoons, so like this much of the cube. And you want it to be cold. If you have a pastry cutter, which I don't have one on me, unfortunately, that is a great tool to use. You can also use a fork to cut this in, or your hands. I'm actually gonna use my hands because I'm a hands-on kind of gal. So you want to cube this first, especially if you're using your hands or a fork. If you don't have like a specific tool for this, cubing your butter, like making it as small as possible before you actually put it into the flour, is just really helpful. Basically what you're gonna do, I don't know if you can kind of see, if you're using your hands, you're gonna just take the butter and flour and just squeeze it. If you're using a fork, what you'd want to do would be kind of smash it against the side of the bowl. And you're just going to do this until you can't really see or feel distinct butter pieces in the flour. You want everything to be pretty much cohesive. This is something you would do if you're making like a pastry dough, like a pie dough. You always will cut the butter into the flour. And it just gives it a nice flaky texture when it bakes. I really would recommend using your hands because it's fun. It's nice to get a feel for what you're doing. I sometimes think that if you're too tethered to utensils, you don't really, it's harder to get a feel for what you're doing. And I think that if you're a beginner baker, it's especially hard to feel like you know what's going on when you kind of have a utensil between you and the food, if that makes sense. So hand mixing is always a plus. So we are almost there. I don't know if you can see, but pretty much just a few pieces left. And it's fine. It doesn't have to be perfect. Nothing has to be perfect. Baking actually isn't as scary as people seem to think it is. It is a science. It's more of a science than cooking. Like, you can't just throw things together in a pot and call it bread. There is a little bit of a process to it, but there is room for experimentation and error that won't result in your kitchen exploding or poison. So, okay, so the butter is cut in, and let's see how our buttermilk is going. Oh, it's perfect. It's kind of curdly on the top. Do you see that? That is great. That is what we want. So I'm gonna put that in there. Okay. You can use whatever to stir this. Like, I'm gonna use a fork. Really doesn't matter. You could use your hands if you want. You don't have to. Kind of give it a fairly okay mix. And then you need 1 egg. So now I'm using my hands just because I like the feeling. But you're gonna feel it kind of come together, and it's gonna be kind of sticky and nice. It kind of looks like this. I'm not quite done mixing, but you basically just want to make sure that the dry and the wet ingredients are not like visibly separate. And then optionally, you can add anything you want to this recipe. The recipe calls for like a cup of raisins. Like I said earlier, you can, if you don't like raisins, you can use cranberries, or I don't know, you could chop up some other dried fruit and put it on in there. It's really up to you. I've seen on some websites, some people put in like caraway seeds and like other spices. If you want to make it sweeter, you could put in like cinnamon and ginger or something. I don't know. This is really up to you and what you have in the house. Recipe calls for a cup. That's kind of up to you. I'm not measuring. I'm just gonna pour and then mix them into the dough. This is what we have. It's a raisin loaf situation. And you basically just form it and plop it in your vessel, as I like to call it. And then just get all the extra stuff off of your hands or utensil that you were using, because This is good stuff here. So we have that baby in the skillet, and you're gonna want to score an X on it, and this just allows air to escape. I'm gonna wash my hands. I'm just gonna grab a knife, big boy knife, and just, it doesn't have to be super deep. I'm kind of here. You can kind of see my first line just go boop. It's just enough to let the air out while it's baking. Bake until the bread is golden brown and the center appears cooked through. About 45 minutes. So yeah, the recipe says about 45 minutes. This really depends on you and your oven and maybe the elevation. Just keep an eye on it. Maybe something I always do with recipes that require baking. If they give you a set time, I usually set it like 5 minutes less, and then I'll start checking at 5 minutes. And I'm gonna put this in the oven while I'm talking, but so timer set for 40 minutes. I'm gonna check it at 40 minutes. If you are checking it, try not to open the oven door. Like, just turn on the light and peek at it, because every time you open the oven door, you let out most of the heat, and the oven has to like completely get back up to the temperature. So you actually make things take longer if you're continually opening the door and peeking. Yeah, so I'll see you in 45 minutes, I guess. Yeah, thanks for joining me.